Hey, good morning, everyone. Jenny Holterman with the Water Association of Kern County and Jean Lundquist, our president. Thank you all for joining us today. We have Karla Nemeth with the California Department of Water Resources here to give a presentation for us. So thank you so much, Karla. She will give us her presentation, and following that, we'll have question and answers. So if you guys have any questions, please put them into the question and answer box, not the chat box. Please direct any questions. You can do it throughout the discussion and we'll come to them at the end in that question and answer box. Or if you would prefer, you can raise a hand and we'll get to you then. But we are very excited to have Karla with us today. And I'll have Jean do a brief introduction.
All right. Well, thank you, Jenny. I want to make just a few remarks before Karla starts her presentation. And first of all, for those of you that have the Bakersfield Californian, I would urge you to look at it this morning. The Water Association of Kern County is not only on the front page, but we have the headline on the front page with our newest promotion of the magic of water, and the bank building that we have covered with a murals, I should say, out in Oildale. So take a look at that. I think it's really quite something. The other thing I want to say is, man, Karla Nemeth, you are quite a draw because we have 142 people that signed up for this webinar. And so that's a compliment to you. So I want to welcome you, Karla, to Kern County. I haven't met you personally yet, but we know of you and hear good reports about your work and leadership at the Department of Water Resources. I want to set the stage a little for people on the call that might need an introduction to Kern County Water. Kern County is the second largest participant in the State Water Project. Kern County's portion of the State Water Project is 982,730 acre-feet annually, delivered to some 14 Kern County public water agencies. The contract with DWR was approved in November of 1963 by the citizens of Kern County. And my gosh, they voted to have this contract with DWR by a whopping margin of 619 votes, 22,448 to 21,829. We didn't pay for any extra votes. And it was the Water Association of Kern County that was formed really to put out publicity and educate people as to the importance of water and why we needed to go into this contract. Obviously, we really benefited tremendously over the years since then with water deliveries. But the county still has tremendous challenges, from increasing environmental regulations and ever expanding demands on our water supply in the system. And of course, right now we're busy implementing Sigma and are working diligently on the Delta Conveyance project and plan. So with that little background, again, Karla, we're so excited that you're on this call and are conducting this webinar. So tell us a little bit about yourself and the California Department of Water Resources.
Sure, thank you, Jean, and it's nice to be with you all today virtually. I'll just start by saying my technology skills are unimpressive and I've had a few challenges, so hopefully from here on out we won't have too many hiccups. I am the director of the Department of Water Resources. We're headquartered in Sacramento. Not only do we manage the State Water Project, but we have a branch that's focused on financial assistance to water districts. We do a lot of water use efficiency, urban and agricultural water management plans. We have flood protection responsibilities in California, dam safety responsibilities, and then our most recent program is implementation of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. And as you can imagine, that the Sigma implementation is a very intensive effort at the department, and that part of our department is really growing. not just to conduct plan review, but I think we're all aware that the real need and importance is in our implementation of sustainable groundwater management. So I am here today to talk to you a little bit more about the Delta Conveyance Project and where we are. This is a project for the State Water Project. As you all may be aware, about 27 million Californians rely on the State Water Project for some portion of their water supply. But that certainly goes hand in hand with lots of investments that local water districts make at the local level in groundwater management, recycling, conserving water, et cetera. And so in the governor's water resilience portfolio, what he describes is the way that we need to integrate a reliable state water project and the Delta Conveyance Project that needs to do that with all these other investments that need to be made with a state, local, and federal partnership. So that policy goal is articulated in the governor's water resilience portfolio. Next slide, Jessica. As I mentioned, why are we spending decades sorting out what to do with this fragile part of the water delivery system for the State Water Project? Well, it's because about 2/3 of our water supply originates in the Sierra Nevada. 50% of our water supply actually flows through the Delta. We have 29 state water contractors that contract with the Department of Water Resources to use that water. And that supplies about 27 million people, not to mention about 750,000 acres of irrigated agriculture. All of this goes to support about 5 trillion California economy. Next slide, Jessica. So a lot of folks like to think about water in California as, a big north to south sort of battle, if you will. We've always had that tension here in California. But what's important to remember is that while most of the state's precipitation and snowfall is in that northern corner of the state, it's really throughout California where water is transported great distances. So in particular for the State Water Project, you can see that the State Water Project serves Californians in the North Bay, in the South Bay of the Bay Area. Obviously, here in the Central Valley, it provides almost half the water supply for folks on the Central Coast. And then you can see about 30% in the Inland Empire, Southern California, and some of our desert communities. What's interesting about this to me is exactly how geographically diverse. And that's yet another reason why securing the reliability of the State Water Project is so very important. Next slide, Jessica. Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, in the context of the governor's water resilience portfolio, the State Water Project does integrate in a very important way with other kinds of local projects, be they local storage, recycled water projects, improved efforts at conservation, groundwater recharge, and also importantly is water quality management. A lot of folks who get imported water supplies from the Colorado River blend Northern California supplies with their
Karla?
Colorado
Karla, this is Gene.
River.
You're not coming through on your vocal right now.
To deal with dissolved
You're still not coming through. Your audio is garbled. Hang on, everybody. We'll try to get this corrected. I don't know what the problem is, but it's technology.
It appears that she lost connection for a short bit. So she'll log back in as soon as our connection stabilizes. Sorry guys for a short technical difficulty.
Suggestion to turn her video off while she speaks. Okay. Can you thank them?
Yep, thank you for your suggestions. We'll have Karla pop back on momentarily. So sorry, and we appreciate your patience with us.
Karla, this is Gene. We've had a suggestion that's probably a good one. They suggest that you turn your video off while you speak, and that'll help the internet connection.
Okay, I also just tried to dial in from my phone.
Okay. That works. We can try that too.
Sorry about this. I don't know what this instability is on my end, I think.
There you go.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, let's just roll with this. My apologies. Okay. So I think where I left you, I was saying really just again articulating the important role that the State Water Project plays in integrating with other local supplies, be they local storage projects, recycled water, water conservation, groundwater recharge. And State Water Project water also has a critical water quality component. It's a very clean water source, and it is often used to blend after it's been delivered to our state water contractors. So it's not just about supply, it's also about quality. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, in that central part of the Delta, where 50% of the water supply moves through, it's a very delicate part of the system. It is an estuary that over the decades has been diked and drained, and water is moved through the Delta through a levee system, some of which are more than 100 years old. In the Delta itself, there is an earthquake risk. Several faults around the Delta are expected to have seismic activity in the course of the next 20 years. Climate change is also putting significant pressure on the Delta. So you can imagine all the work that we're doing in California to deal with sea level rise. Well, the Delta is one of those places where we anticipate a significant amount of seawater intrusion as sea levels rise over time. And then finally, knowing that we are heading into a hydrologic pattern that is more extreme, meaning we have deeper, longer droughts that are punctuated with big rain events coming through. The fragility of the Delta as it exists is increasing over time. Next slide, please. So we have been working on a Delta conveyance project for California in one way or another for about 40 years. In fact, when the State Water Project was first constructed, it was envisioned that there would be a canal around the Delta. That was not built as part of the first phase of the State Water Project. And over time, some of the challenges that were anticipated have come to bear. So some of the conflicts that we have between operating the pumps in the South Delta and the presence of important native fish species, we kind of understood that 40 years ago, and sure enough, it has come to pass. And the big challenge there is when we do have these large storm events, there are periods when we're not able to deliver that water because of attracting these fish into the pumps. So we very much need to adjust that physical dynamic, and the Delta Conveyance Project is one way to do that. As an overall proposition, the purpose of the Delta Conveyance Project is to make the State Water Project more reliable. So one, enabling it to operate in a more fish-friendly way with an added point of diversion, but also over the long term, making sure that our point of diversion is a good guard against all the challenges that I mentioned, the earthquake risk, sea level rise, and these intense storm events that we anticipate with climate change. So next slide, please. So our current planning efforts, there's 3 aspects underway. We have the regulatory side, which is your CEQA and NEPA document. We have Endangered Species Act, a Clean Water Act requirements, water rights. And also we need to be compliant with the Delta Plan, which was part of the Delta Reform Act passed in 2009 that articulated the co-equal goals in the Delta, meaning water supply reliability and ecosystem restoration needed to be operating in parity as we make decisions in the Delta. And those 2 things need to happen in the context of really acknowledging the Delta as a place. It's the home to many legacy communities in California, as a important recreational industry in the Delta. And that really leads us to community benefits as another kind of tier of things that we are working on in the context of planning. And that is working with folks in the Delta to identify ways in which we could construct the project that would actually enhance the Delta and provide community benefits. We are working on stakeholder engagement through a stakeholder engagement committee, and as well as tribal consultation, and also working very intensely on environmental justice analysis and ensuring that the project protects those communities. Next slide, please. So we have really a 4 kind of tier planning process underway. We've already done our initial outreach. We've had scoping meetings. We are now in project definition mode, leading us to a draft EIR. So based on the scoping information, we've taken a look at different alternatives, and we're developing various technical reports to articulate what a constructible project could look like. We anticipate having a draft EIR out in the next about 1.5 years, and we're working towards completion of that shortly thereafter. Next slide, please. So this is a little bit small for me to see on my phone, so I think I will get this right here. So many of you have probably seen a picture of this if you've been following this project for a while. As you may know, Governor Schwarzenegger in the mid-2000s resurfaced the need to construct improved conveyance in the Delta, and that was done as part of a much broader, what was called a conservation plan for both aquatic and terrestrial species. And in that planning effort, it was initially focused on a canal of 15,000 cubic feet per second. That is that's the size of the pumping facilities down in the South Delta. During that process, the Department of Water Resources started looking at putting the facility underground, and then it became a tunnel. And then during Governor Brown's tenure, the focus was on 2 tunnels. at a total of 9,000 cubic feet per second. And we were really focused on this alignment up there, sort of in the northern part of the delta that went straight through and tunneled under the delta, pretty much in a straight line to the existing pumping plants. When Governor Newsom was elected, he wanted to make sure that we were looking at a project that was affordable and the right size for the water users who would pay for it. So he signaled his interest in a single tunnel project and a single tunnel project at 6,000 cubic feet per second. So in the course of preparing those environmental documents, one of the things that we've accomplished is we've started to really take a look at improved engineering that could help us address some issues up front around constructability. And that investigation has led us to carry forward another alignment alternative, and that's the one, also a tunnel, but that's the one you see sort of swinging to the east there. And that's important because we think it offers significant promise to reduce construction costs. The central part of the delta, to construct in that part of the delta would require significant road rebuilding on some fairly fragile levees and conditions that were not well known. So one of the important things about our latest round of work on this is getting that engineering done so that we can be prepared to make a very knowledgeable decision on the proposed project, its alignment, and have the benefit of that engineering information. Next slide, please. So we are looking at proposed alternatives. So as you can see here, we have been in a screening process for alternatives. We are looking at a no project alternative, and then a no project alternative that also takes into consideration some of the projects, some of the local water supply projects that are currently being planned in the service area in the next 15 years. We can get a better understanding of, whether it's what happens if we do no project at all, where does the investment go, and that sort of thing. We are also looking at various sizes of facilities from 3,000 cubic feet per second all the way up to about 7,000 cubic feet per second. And as we get to the draft EIR, we will have a full analysis of all those individual alternatives. So next slide, please. So as I mentioned, our conveyance schedule is, we are looking for a draft environmental document in 2022 to be made available, and then completion of a final environmental document in sort of late 2023. Down at the bottom of the slide in green, you can see that we have a lot of different permits to get that are that interact with the environmental document. And then those permits that extend beyond the NEPA and CEQA document are those that require a completed document to move forward. So some of that is our Delta plan consistency and the change petition that we would have for water rights in front of the Water Resources Control Board. Next slide, please. So you may also be aware that we have the public water agencies have established what's called a Delta Conveyance Design and Construction Authority. So DWR is the lead agency on all of this work effort, which is partly why I'm here talking to you about it today. But the public water agencies put together a JPA in anticipation of design and construction of the facility. It's something that we think at DWR is going to be an important project delivery mechanism to get the public water agencies in and managing for the design and construction and on time, under budget project delivery. And then the public water agencies themselves continue to work with their individual boards around funding and participation. So as we complete the environmental review process and we have more detailed information, the public water agencies boards will move forward to make commitments around their ratepayer dollars for design and construction. Right now, we are simply in a planning phase, and I'm really enthused to report that we are about almost 90% subscribed, if you will, in the planning phase, meaning we have public water agencies that have expressed an interest in about 90% of the project. This is really important because this is not a vote that we had taken associated with the previous projects. And of course, Governor Newsom does want this project to be affordable for the local water agencies who would be paying for it. Next slide, please. I did want to say a little bit about where we are this year in terms of the 2021 water year. In a nutshell, frankly, it's not great. We also had a not great year last year, but we had a strange year. And I point that out because that's the world we're living in, right? So last year we had a little bit of early rain, we had a dry January, then we had an historically dry February, driest on record. And then we got into March and it was moderate in Northern California, rather wet in Southern California. And I say this because these new hydrologic patterns really challenge how we make sure that we're preparing for the future and make sure that we're leaving water in Oroville in the event of another dry year. As you know, when we really get into dry or even drought conditions is when we have successive dry years and we really start to go through our storage. So it's always important that we're doing things as efficiently as possible. The ag sector in California is one of the most efficient in the country, and we're very proud of that. But as you can see, it is a very dry year this year. We have an initial allocation of temporary surveys just about monthly over the course of the winter. Unfortunately, we're looking at a dry January, but I just started to see some forecasts that see the resilient ridge of high pressure, which is keeping all of our moisture up to the Pacific Northwest. There are signs that that might break down by the end of this month. And all of that, frankly, means the better that we can get at long-term forecasting, the easier it will be for all of us, not just DWR, but local water agencies to plan for California's variable hydrology. Next slide, please. So I did want to mention, as I said at the outset, the Department of Water Resources does an enormous amount of work in supporting local water agencies on some of their needs. So as you can see, we've had a lot of successful grant applications from Kern County. Hats off to you local agencies who have been putting in all that good work. But here's just a smattering of the grants that have been given in the recent past. Next slide, please. So there's multiple ways that you can stay informed on all this business, certainly on Delta Conveyance. If you go to water.ca.gov into programs, State Water Project, Delta Conveyance, you can follow us on Twitter. We do have a project hotline and a project email. If you have any questions, we do have folks who can answer questions in multiple languages. So particularly for folks who are in EJ communities, I would urge you to take advantage of all of these facets of information. Next slide, please. Oh, I think that may be it. Okay, so I know we were anticipating some Q&A coming through.
Am I off mute?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
All right, thank you, Karla. This is Gene again. That was very good. We apologize for some of the technical difficulties, but yes, I would encourage the participants on the webinar to submit your questions through the chat program. I don't see any yet, but I'll start off with a question. Karla, with the change in the federal administration, do you see any changes as far as DWR's relationship and in providing for progress with the Delta Conveyance Plan?
Oh, most definitely. We have been talking to the incoming federal administration about their role in the Delta Conveyance project. Right now, one of our challenges has been that the lead on the federal documents has been the Army Corps of Engineers, and we're very grateful for them for stepping up and performing that role. But it's been unclear the role of the Bureau of Reclamation, and of course we do need federal permits from National Marine Fisheries and the Fish and Wildlife Service. So I'm really looking forward to working with the incoming administration to make sure that we're engaged those other parties as well.
Okay, thank you. Well, here's another question. The GSPs have been submitted to the Department of Water Resources, and your staff has been reviewing them for adequacy. Are there any central issues rising to the surface based on those reviews?
Well, I think, yeah, and I don't think any of them are going to come as a big surprise. I mean, I think part of our challenge is going to be, quality of the data and how to make decisions based on data, and kind of adequacy of what I'll just describe as Plan B. So if certain projects and programs don't work out as planned, how thoughtful are the other decisions, or how laid out are the other decisions that the GSAs will need to make sure that their plans are brought into balance. I do think that the interconnection between plans has been challenging, and I would say that's not a huge surprise. One of the things that we're really learning about Sigma as we move forward, of course, local control is paramount. I don't think Sigma would have passed the legislature if it didn't invest in enormous responsibility with folks at the local levels to make decisions for how best to deal with their groundwater basin. That said, there are a lot of interconnected areas and interconnected basins. Identify ways in which, and DWR is starting to identify ways in which additional planning and hydrologic modeling can help us understand the interconnection of some of these groundwater basins. So, as a for instance, there's a lot of interest in groundwater recharge using floodwaters, which is great. But as we learn a little bit more about the soil types and so forth, it doesn't work everywhere. And so, what does that mean for how we organize ourselves? So while the GSAs have done a tremendous work at the local level to get their local plan together, during implementation, as we move forward, it's my view that, these plans are going to get a little bit more connected regionally. And we need to start thinking in those terms as well, because a lot of the solution sets are going to require more regional collaboration amongst the plans themselves.
Okay, thank you. Well, the next question comes from a familiar person, Brent Walthall. And he says, "Hi, Karla. Thank you for your presentation and time today. You focused today on the DCP for good reason. Could you also tell us about other activities DWR is leading that are exciting to you and how directly or indirectly they impact Kern County?"
Oh, super. Hi, Brent. That's a great question. There is a lot of cool things underway at the department. Some of it is in this forecasting world. So the DWR is very engaged with Scripps Institute in San Diego to do some of this atmospheric river forecasting so that we can understand relative strength and landfall so that we can be better prepared for it. All of that work is done with investments in satellite technology and it's really going to improve our ability to forecast and create storage space when we know a big storm event is coming through. And I think ultimately, as we continue to develop that kind of technology, that's going to have broad benefit throughout California and in Kern County as well. We are also working intently on a variety of granting programs. As you saw, we had a lot of Prop 1 grants. We also have a lot of Sigma related grants, groundwater related grants, and you may be aware that in the governor's budget yesterday, he included $60 million in technical assistance and implementation grants that I think will be very useful for Kern County and folks who are engaged in that groundwater management. We are looking at state water project reliability in more ways than just the Delta. One of those ways is working through an asset management plan that includes dealing with subsidence along the California aqueduct. So right now the aqueduct has subsided. Some of that was considered natural when the original aqueduct was designed and constructed, but it is subsiding even further. And the challenge with that right now is when we have these big water years, like 2017, we're increasingly unable to move water during those peak flows. So that definitely gets our attention as a problem that very much needs to be fixed. Because again, we know that we're going to have these big pulses, these big storm events coming through California, and we very much want to be able to move water when we can. The other thing that I'm super excited about is the water transfer program we have. DWR with the public water agencies has completed what we call the water management tools contract amendment. But basically what it allows state water contractors to do is it allows them to enter into long-term water transfers with their counterparts, which is a great tool for managing between urban and agricultural needs. It's a great tool for water agencies to generate revenue that can then help fund local projects. It's something that was really next generation for California in terms of flexibility, in terms of how we move water. And we have provisions so that that work gets done in a very transparent way. Whenever we want more flexibility in how we govern and manage, key to making that successful in the public's eye is making sure that we're transparent about the decisions we're making. So this means that, for example, in this year, which is shaping up to be very dry, we'll have significant work on the water transfer market to get water from places north of the Delta to south of the Delta. And it also, the water transfer tools would now allow for a longer term transfer to happen amongst water districts south of the Delta, say from an urban agency to a Kern County water agency in ways that we could not do before. So that I'm really excited about that flexibility, and we are continuing to improve the water transfer program that the department administers. And then the final thing I'll say, Brent, is, which I think is something that's sort of near and dear to your heart, which is the State Water Project has hired a chief financial manager, which was not a position that we had had. And to me, what's really important about this is it acknowledges the fact that the State Water Project, I mentioned that we have an asset management plan underway. The State Water Project is a very extensive piece of aging infrastructure, and we do need to reinvest in that. And it's very important to me that the state water contractors have full confidence in the department that we are really strong on our financial management of all aspects of the State Water Project. So that's a new position, and we're doing a lot of work with the state water contractors to articulate the most efficient, cost-effective ways that we can ensure that we are protecting public safety and we are providing for reliable, affordable water supplies.
Thank you.
So that's my short list.
Well, we're getting several questions in, so I hope that you can continue answering here. Here's one from Jeff Looker. I'm not certain that you're going to be able to do this, but he says, will you please go back to the slide regarding project alternatives and elaborate on the alternatives? I would say if you can, that's great, but maybe briefly.
Sure. So, so we're looking at multiple alternatives. Here's a sort of a way of thinking about it. So there's the traditional no project alternative, which is, what if we do nothing? And in the context of that, we have sort of a sub-alternative that also takes a look at the projects that water districts that rely on the Delta. If the Delta fix did not happen, if we did not do the tunnel, over time, you will see an erosion of available supplies, and that's primarily due to hydrology. And so the no action alternative also has a component where it looks at, not only would, folks need to continue to invest in their local supplies to deal with things like Sigma and other things, but they would also need to make up for a hole in their state water project deliveries that would be the result of relying on the pumps in the South Delta and changing hydrology in California that would reduce state water project deliveries. So that's one kind of part of the alternatives. And then, of course, you get into things that are a little bit more traditional, which is single tunnel alternatives. So we're looking at 3,000, I think we're looking at 4,500, we're looking at 6,000 CFS, and we're looking at 7,000 CFS. And we're looking at operational combinations with those alternatives that are exclusively state water project, and some that have a combination of Bureau of Reclamation participation. So Reclamation has not indicated its willingness to participate in this project. We do expect to reinvigorate those discussions with the incoming administration, but we certainly want to make sure that the state has a project moving forward, the state water project has a project moving forward, that if the federal water contractors, for one reason or another, decided they did not want to invest, that we would still have a viable project to move forward. So that's the reason for carrying forward in alternatives, kind of multiple scenarios. And then we also have, as was on the slide, two different routes that we're really taking a closer look at. One is the tunnel that is through the central part of the Delta. That was the preferred project. That was 2 tunnels under Governor Brown. Now, of course, we're looking at 1 tunnel, but we've also identified this route to the east that, given its proximity to I-5, it may turn out to be ultimately, even if it's a little bit longer, it may turn out to be ultimately more constructible and therefore more affordable. So that's my kind of spiel on alternatives.
All right, thank you again, Karla. Here's another question from a Mr. Brandon Dawson. And he says, considering the amount of water that is currently flowing through the Delta and the State Water Board's lack of implementation and development of the 2 phases of Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan, how is the state dealing with the reality that it's highly uncertain how much water will be available for the tunnel?
It's a great question. So for what it's worth, I do think the Water Board needs to start moving a little bit more quickly on the phase 2, because we continue to work on what are called these voluntary watershed agreements. That's with the Secretary of EPA and the Secretary for Natural Resources, where we are putting together new approaches to flows for the environment, combined with physical restoration in the various tributaries that flow to the Delta. And what we want to be able to do is take this kind of comprehensive agreement and bring it to the water board and have them examine it in the context of both phase 1 and phase 2 together. And the ultimate goal is to have something that's acceptable to the water board, that we can start to implement right away, and that does more than simply provide flows for the environment. Because what we have realized over time is that the degradation of the habitat in these watersheds, and particularly when we have warming ambient conditions, that habitat becomes increasingly more important to keep water temperatures cooler and create appropriate spawnings. Very much need to get done, and that will enable us to understand even more fully how the Delta Conveyance project would be operated. And we're working to make sure that those things happen in the right sequence and time, so that we can both sort of answer the question based on the science as we understand it today. What does the Delta estuary need relative to the volume and timing of water? What does it need relative to physical restoration at landscape scale for salmon and other species, and how that relates to water infrastructure projects such as Delta Conveyance?
Here's a question from an anonymous attendee. Has the Department of Water Resources done any studies on the impacts of Sigma?
We have not done economic studies on Sigma. We're certainly reading those. There's PPIC put one out. Dr. David Sunding put one out. So we are definitely examining those. We are looking, as we're looking at the plans and reviewing the plans, ones that are maybe a little bit more forward thinking on demand management. We are starting to engage with some of those GSAs about economic impacts, and working more broadly across state government. So for example, in the water resilience portfolio, Governor Newsom established a statewide task force on Sigma implementation. And what it's really about is a statewide task force that can deal with the impacts of Sigma implementation. So it's much broader than simply DWR or the Water Resources Control Board. It really reaches into some of our business development and other arms where we can provide economic assistance. So we are starting to get organized based on the plans, but no, DWR itself has not done its own economic analysis of Sigma implementation writ large.
All right, we have a couple of more questions, and then Karla, you've been very patient. We appreciate the dialogue with you. I know that everyone does, but we don't want to keep you here forever. In fact, you look like you might be getting dehydrated. All right, here's another question from Jeffrey Vandenheuvel. What are the implications of the virtual extinction of the Delta smelt to the operational restrictions in the Delta?
Smelt, there's go extinct in terms of in the wild. We do have programs, a species hits this kind of brink. But as a general matter, I would say that I don't see the extinction of Delta smelt, in the wild as having a significant effect on the regulatory environment that we need to operate in. And here's why. There's a lot of species, threatened and endangered species in the Delta. We have longfin, we have our salmon species, and we also have other requirements under the Clean Water Act to and under the public trust doctrine to protect all beneficial uses of water. And so it isn't simply that, we lose one species and we can suddenly, move X increment of more water. Because we do manage the system holistically, in a sense. All of our permits are multiple species permits under state and federal law, endangered species laws. And then we certainly have the Clean Water Act, which is administered by the Water Board, which was part of the previous question, which is the Water Quality Control Plan. And that sets out regulations that are broader than Delta smell.
All right, well, thank you. You were garbled at first, but I think
Sorry
we got
about that.
No, that's all right. No problem. It's not your fault. I think that's the last question that I have seen come up. Let's check real quick. Jenny, do you see any others? All right. Well, again, we can't thank you enough, Karla. It's been very nice meeting you, and we so appreciate your taking the time to come to Kern County, so to speak. And we hope to have you down here someday after this COVID-19 thing is over and actually meet you in person.
I would very much enjoy that. And thank you for giving me this opportunity. It's been wonderful to talk with you all today, and have a safe month of January.
Okay, now I'm going to give a little sales pitch right here. For those of you in Kern County, this is the Water Association of Kern County, a nonprofit, and we live by contributions and memberships. So I would urge you to get in touch with Jenny Holterman and sign up and become a part of the Water Association. This is such an important part of Kern County and really the state of California. So with that, again, thank you so much, Karla, and we appreciate the job you're doing. Bye, everybody.